hasn't been in my lifetime a movement as radical as the Bernie Sanders-led progressive movement. It took me by surprise. 2 years ago, if you were to say, hey, there's going to be a big communist element and it's going to get traction, I went, what are you talking about, Albania?
But who's a communist? Who's a communist?
Welcome to Political Crossfire. We break down the fiercest political debates. Today, we're looking at a fiery NewsNation exchange between Chris Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly that quickly turns into a much bigger argument over Bernie Sanders, progressive Democrats, socialism, communism, Medicare for all, universal childcare, and the direction of the Democratic Party. O'Reilly argues that the progressive movement represents one of the most radical political forces he has witnessed in his lifetime, eventually going so far as to call Bernie Sanders the most dangerous man in the country. But Cuomo immediately starts challenging the labels. When O'Reilly starts talking about a growing communist element in American politics, Cuomo repeatedly asks a very simple question: who's a communist? So stick around, because we're going to break down the strongest moments from this Chris Cuomo-Bill O'Reilly clash and examine whether O'Reilly makes a legitimate argument about the progressive movement or whether this is old-fashioned Red Scare politics being repackaged for a modern audience. And before we get into it, subscribe to Political Crossfire and turn on the notification bell. Let's get into it.
All right, let's bring in Bill O'Reilly. Good to have you, Bill. Last night, Dr. El Sayed wins in Michigan. His platform becomes this call and response that he does every time he speaks. Get money out of politics, put money in people's pockets, pass Medicare for all. And he says, I am a capitalist and I care about Michigan. And he beat the Democratic incumbent that they were pushing on him from the House to run for Senate. He was outspent 8-1. He still won. You say he's a gift to Mike Rogers. How?
Well, because the Republicans will coalesce around Rogers. There's not going to be a lot of dissent in that party. There will be dissent in the Democratic precincts. Look, politicians say what they want to say. You know that. If you look back at El Sayed's previous statements about the border, about the police, it's clear the man is a radical progressive. Now, whether he's a communist or a socialist, doesn't matter much to me. He's a danger, in my opinion, to public safety. I don't care what he says. You can say anything you want if you're a politician. But what he has put out there is certainly as radical as it gets. Open borders, my God. Did he not see the Spanish thing? But
he says he's not in favor of open borders. He says he's in favor of abolishing ICE as currently constructed because they're violating the law. But I got to correct the record for the audience, right? Because he doesn't say open borders. So when you say open borders, oh my gosh, no, I don't.
The record
has changed correct what you're saying.
5 times. No, the record has changed 5 times.
I mean, if that were the basis, thered be a lot of lawmakers that aren't in office, and I don't know that it's changed.
I don't do the
5 times with El Sayed. I know you don't. I know you don't because we know why. Okay. We know why you don't. I wouldn't if I were you either. I know you don't.
Okay, and you'd be smart not to, because it's an infantile way to analyze the news.
No, it's a way to hide from who's the president. Go ahead.
Okay, now let me make a couple of points. Al Sayed started as a very, very radical person, and then he kind of morphed into not so radical. So to say and take at face value what he's saying now is a leap of faith, to use a cliche. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because the Democratic Party, as you pointed out, doesn't like him. They don't want him. They don't want people like him. Whether he's a true radical or not, it is just spoiling the whole Democratic message. So you have to assume, and African-American votes will be big on this, you have to assume that the Democratic Party is going to fight among itself, while the Republican Party is not. They're going to coalesce around him. They're going to demonize him. They're going to say this is Bernie Sanders light. That's what they'll do. And that will drive people to the poll. Now, who wins? A lot of outside money will come in, a lot. And it's up to people to evaluate the histories of Rogers and Al Sayed. That's what you have to evaluate, what they have said in the past, okay? And then make a determination, because politicians will tell you anything you want to hear, Cuomo, and you know that.
Look, I mean, if it were a veracity contest, our elections would come out very differently than they have in the near past. What I'm saying is, I don't think that analysis makes sense in the general. It makes sense in the primary. But now the Democrats, you just saw, everyone who ran against them was standing behind El Sayed. The party says they're fully with him now. And you can see that as hypocritical. You can see that as whatever you want to see it. But in the general, They have a registration advantage. It's a Democratic seat, right? Peters is abandoning the seat, right? The sitting senator.
Right.
And Mike Rogers is not exactly a new and shiny thing. He is a MAGA, establishment guy.
Look, I don't know much about Rogers, but I do know that the latest polls say. And they've got him either tied or within one of al-Sayed.
Or up.
So it's going to be a close race.
Or up. But remember,
El-Sayed
has been getting his ass kicked by his own party. Now that's going to change. Now they're not going to say the same things.
That will continue. That will continue.
Why?
Because the smart Democrats don't want to be tied to Bernie Sanders's progressive, communist, socialist, whatever you want to label it, movement. They don't.
Well, he says he's a capitalist, but they'd rather lose a Senate seat.
Loser.
They'd rather lose a Senate seat.
There's a lot of people going to stay home. And the African-American vote, which I'm studying now, progressives do very poorly. Even in New York City, they didn't do nearly as well as they thought they would with Mamdani. I don't know why exactly, but we're looking at it. But when you have a divided party against a party that is together, that is an advantage for the party that is together.
Yeah, I don't know that your assumption is right, but you're right. Being divided is harder than being united. I agree with you in a bipartisan system. What I'm saying is, it's one thing in the primary. Look, we see this all the time, which is in the primary we hate each other, but then when it's against the other guys, especially in this toxic twosome that our party politics is, we got to come together because the last thing we want is, as Democrats would say, is another Trumper, especially in a blue seat.
Well,
so I don't understand that motivation.
Then I will enlighten you.
Please.
There hasn't been in my lifetime a movement as radical as a Bernie Sanders-led progressive movement. It took me by surprise. 2 years ago, if you were to say, hey, there's going to be a big communist element and it's going to get traction, I went, what are you talking about, Albania?
But who's a communist? Who's a communist? Who's a communist?
Look, the means of production is what people like Mamdani want to control. All you got to do is look it up, okay? The means of production. They want to control that.
Is the mayor of New York City. He's the mayor of New York City. He has done nothing to take away private property. He's taxing. He's doing other things that he said he was going to do when he was running. But this socialist thing, let alone communism, there's not a communist country on the face of the planet.
I know you don't buy it.
It's a boogeyman.
It's quite clear you don't buy it. People believe what they want to believe. But he's frozen rents, in New York City. That's the first step. Now he wants grocery stores to undercut other grocery stores. The guy is called classic Marxist person. Yesterday, it was amazing because Bernie
he's the mayor of New York City. He's not the entire party, right? I mean, it's like you can have a guy who is out there, but and the people where he ran wanted him. No, but I'm saying that why do you think that that's going to... I know, but why do you think that that will affect all Democratic races, one mayor? Because
it's basically a radical movement. When a Bernie Sanders, who's the most dangerous man in the country, he goes out and, we want to control children. Okay? We want to control children. And you're going, okay. That's what they do in every communist country. So they want what that means. When did Bernie Sanders say we want to control?
Yeah.
He said it yesterday. Universal child care. Okay?
Yeah.
What universal child care is you take the tyke at age 4 or 5. He goes through a system of left-wing academia. He comes out into Columbia University, and presto, you've got a little replicant running around spouting Bernie Sanders stuff.
You sound like a Red Scare guy from 1955. That is what they do. All right.
What?
Bill, thank you for making your case. It was Dusty saying I got to go. But look, I get your theory of the case. We'll see how it plays out, and we'll see.
Chris Cuomo's comparison to the Red Scare is probably the most revealing moment in the entire discussion, because that is exactly what this rhetoric sounds like. Instead of debating progressive policies on their merits, Bill O'Reilly repeatedly reaches for words like communist, Marxist, and radical as if the labels themselves are enough to end the conversation. That kind of politics has a long history in America. During the McCarthy era, accusations of communism became a weapon, careers were destroyed, reputations were ruined, and people were treated as enemies simply because somebody decided to attach a frightening political label to them. That does not mean every modern accusation is identical to what happened in the 195 OS, but the strategy is familiar. Take a policy you dislike, attach the most frightening ideological label possible, and hope the audience reacts emotionally before anyone examines what is actually being proposed. And that is where Bill O'Reilly's argument becomes especially weak. Medicare for all is not the government seizing every business in America. Universal childcare is not the state taking control of children. A mere freezing rents is not the abolition of private property. You can oppose every one of those policies, but if you are going to call them communism, you should be able to explain the connection without relying entirely on fear. The contradiction becomes even harder to ignore when O'Reilly describes the progressive movement as the most radical political force of his lifetime while simultaneously treating Donald Trump and MAGA as something normal. Whatever someone thinks about Bernie Sanders, the idea that he represents a greater threat than every other political movement in modern American life is a very difficult argument to defend. So in the end, this debate is not really about whether Bill O'Reilly likes Bernie Sanders. It is about whether political labels are being used to avoid discussing actual policies. If someone wants to argue that Medicare for all is too expensive, make that argument. If they think universal childcare would be badly managed, explain why. Bill O'Reilly seems to suggest that government-supported childcare is somehow a pathway toward ideological indoctrination. But for most working parents, childcare is not some political experiment, it is a practical necessity. People need somewhere safe for their children to be while they work. If they oppose higher taxes or rent controls, debate the economics. But simply shouting communist every time a progressive wins an election is not analysis. It is fear politics. And if you enjoy sharp, fact-based breakdowns of the biggest political clashes, please subscribe to Political Crossfire and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. What do you think, who made the stronger argument? Share your opinion below and subscribe to Political Crossfire for more political debates and analysis.